It's got a little bit of a gain here that I can turn up if I need to. I can't hear myself very well, but how about now? You can hear me good? Okay. All right. All right, well, thanks everyone for being here this morning. Welcome to the Baled session. This is a subject that has been one that is still something that is very, still quite new. I think a lot of folks are using this technology to great effect. We still get a lot of questions about that. I know I get a lot of questions about that in Georgia and the Southeast. And this is a session that we thought would be a good idea to cover some of the basics and then work up to some of the science that underpins a lot of the recommendations. I'm going to start out with a talk, and unfortunately it's quite similar to the talk that was given yesterday morning, but I think maybe repetition is good sometimes. There are a few things that I've added and there's a few things that I've taken out rather than repeating some of that, but I want to focus on some of the keys from my perspective of what are the keys to making great baleage. So I'll start out with more of the practical aspects, and then we'll have a couple of scientists doing some work in that field who will fill in some of the details there for us. So, this is not just making wet hay, right? There's a difference here from what we're seeing here depicted. And I think, unfortunately, this is, for some folks, this is the idea that they have in mind for what baleage is. And it's definitely different than that. Let me start out with defining this because it really is silage. And the brief overview here of silage is it's a forage preservation technique that utilizes the fermentation of sugars into acid. And that acid is what prevents the spoilage that occurs. So you're taking plant sugars and primarily converting it over to lactic acid, some acetic acid, some other organic acids as well. The key there is it has to be in anaerobic conditions. And this is what prevents the mold growth, the yeast growth, and some rather nasty bacterial growth as well. The low pH here, the way that works actually reduces the enzymatic activity of some of the undesirable bacteria. And that's what really makes this work, is the low pH. Now this is not a new process. And siling has been going on since the 1500 BC era, according to some historical work and anthropological work that's been done over the years. Baled silage is a variation of this, and something that has, it's much more efficient than just making hay for a variety of perspectives. Because if you look at the losses that are along each step of the way here, in the field, in the wilting process, there's much less respiration loss, in the field at least, 2 to 5% loss. Baling loss, because you're keeping a lot more moisture in the crop, you're not shattering as many leaves, you're getting a lot more of that into the baler, so less than 5% loss there. Storage loss, this is one that can be kind of all over the board. This is a survey of the literature, but honestly, I think typically what you'd find is about 10% loss, 10 to 15% loss for baleage, and then minimal feeding loss. Really, these animals will literally lick the ground where this stuff has been. They really do eat it well. And of course, if you're managing it correctly, and the end result can be, maybe as much as 85, 90% of what was originally in the field. Now here's the goal, right, is to avoid weather damage. And that's one of the reasons why it became so popular in Europe decades ago, and now it's becoming a lot more popular for us here in the U.S. It really enables a timely harvest, lowers the risk of rain damage. It's not out there for exposed to the elements. At least in the Southeast, it might be out there for 4 or 5 days before it dries down enough for us to be able to store it properly as hay. Whereas for baleage, in many cases you can cut and bale maybe even the same day, but at least overnight, wilting it, and you're at the target moisture. A lot less leaf shatter, and as a result of that, you have a better quality product. Lower fiber components, higher crude protein, increased digestibility, and increased palatability. So the key, though, is that there's nothing magical about wrapping this in white plastic. You put garbage into it, you're going to get garbage back out of it. Okay? When I first started working with this, this is actually some of my master's research at the University of Kentucky. We were doing some field demonstrations and extension work with it, and we had a lot of producers that are taking just junk tall fescue and wrapping it and turning it into something that was a little bit more palatable. Yeah, they would eat it better, but sometimes you can starve to death with a full belly too. So, there's nothing magical about wrapping it in plastic. One thing I do want to share with you, though, is the increases in quality of this product. And I share with you just this slide set, or slide here from some work that I did at the University of Georgia, up in this northwest corner of Georgia in Calhoun. We had, and I want to primarily point out the two lines here at the bottom, ryegrass baleage and ryegrass hay. That field was cut the exact same day, the exact same conditions. We just took random windrows or random swaths and assigned them to baleage or to dry out for hay. This was actually grazed over once ryegrass, so it's not the rocket fuel ryegrass that you might see some really high quality stuff, but it's still, an RFQ of 174 is just outstanding. But you can see the differences that occurred. The same field, same conditions, just a difference in drying time and exposure. You can see the differences in the nutritional value that also translated into animal performance. We fed these to replacement beef heifers without any additional supplementation, and you can see the performance that we were getting there, almost to the point of getting them to roly-poly fat if we would continue on that route. The goal there for replacement heifers would be about 1.75 pounds per head per day. So let's get into the details of what are some of those keys. And I think the very first key is, and probably one of the biggest mistakes is, that producers need to cut down no more than what they can handle in a given period of time. The bottleneck in this operation is the wrapping process, almost usually. And sometimes it's going to be the transportation in and out of the field or what have you. But usually this is the process that's the bottleneck. Every bale needs to be wrapped at least within 12 hours of baling, and I would highly recommend within 4 hours. Highly, highly recommend within 4 hours. 12 hours, you get some significant heating going on there and some significant changes in that, particularly when you're dealing with high sugar material. The amount that you cut has to equal the amount that you can bale and wrap in the same day. Okay? That's where things sometimes go off the rails, is they will cut down more than what they can handle. If you're cutting a field that you normally cut for hay and you cut it the same way, expecting that you will be able to handle that big acreage, and if you've got an individual bale wrapper, that your bottleneck is really going to slow you down to be able to get all of that done in the same day. So you want to lay down an appropriate amount of forage for wilting, baling, and wrapping. And typically, and this is going to vary from site within the U.S., but for our producers in Georgia, usually we can cut mid-afternoon on one day and bale and wrap the next day. Sometimes in the winter months when we're cutting ryegrass, for example, it's going to take a day or two for it to wilt down to the right moisture. But as a general rule for us, that's going to vary by location, of course. The second key then, of course, is to address your bottleneck, which is the bale wrapper. So choosing the right bale wrapper is really, really important. So when you're evaluating those, not only looking at cost, but look at the labor, the speed, and the throughput that you can have for those bale wrappers. So make sure that you know what you're getting. The speed at which you can wrap bales with this kind of system versus an inline system is dramatically different, and the labor requirement there is dramatically different as well. So let's talk about the two basic types of bale wrapping systems. This is the inline bale wrapper, which is a platform on which the bales are placed, and then two rolls are winding their way around the outside of those bales, wrapping in a stretch wrap plastic. We'll talk more about what the plastic does in just a little bit here. And as soon as that gets through, the plunger will retract and you can load another bale. Generally speaking, these you'll be able to wrap bales as quick as you can unload a trailer. It's fairly efficient, time efficient, and so forth. This one may be even just a little slower than what some of the modern ones are. This is about an 8-year-old video now. The individual bale wrappers are quite a bit slower, but they create an individual bale package, as you can see here in the background. The key here, though, is to make sure you size it correctly. You know, the dimensions of this bale wrapper have to match the dimensions of your bale. And the other key there is to make sure that you make good uniform bales. And if they begin to squat and get deformed, you have a real problem getting uniform plastic around the outside of those bales. Just a